Go ahead. Whenever you're ready, Judy.
Okay. So everybody can see my screen, I hope.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I start every presentation on flow-based leadership with this slide, because without, if this young man did not lose his life in the line of duty, I wouldn't be here talking to you about this. On April 16th, 2007, Kyle Wilson, a firefighter for Prince William County, Virginia Department of Fire and Rescue, lost his life in the line of duty. And I didn't know him, but his sacrifice forever changed the trajectory of my life. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. We're going to start with my background, because everybody, particularly if you're in Tech Comm, everybody wants to know, well, how did you get from Tech Comm to studying firefighters? I've been working in IT my whole life, and I ran integrated documentation. I don't know if any of you worked for me or even remember that, in Dallas, Texas for 16 years. And that was a technical writing consulting firm. And in 2007, I decided to go back to school and get my Ph.D. And I, having been in IT for so long, I had witnessed so many organizations making bad decisions. So I was curious as to why people make the decisions they make. But I didn't want to limit my options, my PhD options, to a particular field of study, like psychology or physics or theology or whatever. I wanted to go into a program that allowed me to look at this area of inquiry from any angle I wanted to. So I found the California Institute of Integral Studies, and they have a program in transformative studies, which is transdisciplinary. So I was able to look at decision-making from any angle I wanted to. And as I was looking at the literature on transformation, I discovered this concept called flow, which is a well-researched, thoroughly quantified concept in the field of positive psychology. Flow has very distinct characteristics, which we're going to go over. And I happened to mention these to my brother-in-law, who was a retired battalion chief from Prince William County, Virginia. And he stopped me while I was giving him the characteristics of flow. And he said, let me tell you a story. And he told me about Kyle's story. And Kyle and his partner were called at 6 o'clock in the morning. It was almost shift change. And they went to a house that was fully involved. It was, but they thought there were people inside. So they went in to do a search, and the wind came from the back of the house. This particular incident has become a study in fire behavior within the fire service, which is real interesting. But the wind came in the back of the house, blew open the basement door, came up the steps, fueled the fire, and separated the two firefighters. And Kyle was trapped. And my brother-in-law showed up about 10 minutes in to the call and realized that there was going to be no saving Kyle. And he was the A-side commander who made the determination not to rescue Kyle. And I realized that all the characteristics of flow were in his decision-making process. So I went back to my committee and I told him I wanted to look at the flow experiences of firefighters in the midst of a critical incident. And they told me they interviewed 16 firefighters, 8 men and 8 women. I did a general qualitative study in case any of you are interested in what the methodology was. And my goal was to determine whether being in a flow state actually facilitated decision-making. And I found that the answer was yes, but only if you've had the right training and experience. So what is flow? Let's talk about that for a second, because we got to be on the same page. Flow, first of all, I want to say flow is a feeling. It's not a thing. It is neither negative or positive. I've had people tell me about the negative side of flow. There is no negative or positive to flow. It is either or. Either you're in it or you're not, and it's how you feel in that moment. And everybody is different. But the characteristics are, and I want you to think of an activity that you do, that you love to do, where you have clear goals in the moment and you're receiving feedback that keep you going. There are opportunities for many opportunities for decisive action. The idea of awareness and action merging. Your concentration, you're concentrating on the task at hand. There is a sense of control and confidence. There's a loss of sense of self. There's temporal distortion. Either time speeds up or it slows down, or it doesn't seem to have any kind of meaning at all within the context of what you're doing. And then the experience itself is autotelic. That means you would do the work for the sake of the work. So how does it work? Flow is the intersection of skill and challenge. It's so if you think about that activity I just had you think of, that within that activity there are certain tasks that you do, and there might be a task that you do over and over and over until it becomes kind of boring to do that task. That'll pull you out of flow. So go back to that activity again, starting over. And you're rocking and rolling. You are doing this. Time just has flown by. You're having so much fun, and all of a sudden something presents itself that you've never seen before, and it makes you anxious. And anxiety will pull you out of flow. So how we mitigate that is through training and experience. And preferably that training should be experiential training. So I have to talk about Mihai Csikszentmihalyi just a little bit. He's the one who originally came up with he's the primary person who quantified the characteristics of flow. There were a number of other researchers that were looking at this idea of optimal experience. One of those was Martin Seligman. There's a bunch of other people also, but Mihai Csikszentmihalyi came up with this idea to quantify it, and he came up with an entire methodology. And so he wrote a book called Optimal Experience back in the 80s. And that was the results of this study, that original study that he did. And then he wrote the book called Flow. So if you're interested in reading, reading about flow and getting really deep into it, I suggest you read that book. His name is very, very, very long. But it's pronounced Csikszentmihalyi. So what triggers flow? People are always asking me, well, how can I trigger flow? It's what I found, and what came out of Csikszentmihalyi's studies is something out of the ordinary is probably going to trigger flow. But my flow triggers are going to be different from your flow triggers. I can't tell you exactly what's going to trigger flow for you. It speaks to you in the moment and it drops you into now. It sets off something in you that pushes you forward. Most often it happens at a subconscious level. In fire and EMS, it's often something that's visual. Two of my firefighter friends who have grown up together, they joined the fire service together. They were at the same station on the same shift. They were like, I call them my twins. They when they shaved their head, they both shaved their head. It was just this thing that they had. But they told me when they read my book, they got all excited because what happens to them is when they roll up on scene, they just look at each other and it puts them in flow. They have figured out how to trigger flow within themselves. They just didn't realize there was a name associated with what they were doing. But another thing, people that I interviewed gave me images like we rolled up on scene and there was a woman in the driveway screaming. So, and we all can imagine that what that probably meant is that there were children inside the house. In one case, it was a woman who wasn't screaming that caused the firefighter to drop into flow. She knew something was really bad because the woman was disoriented and she wasn't screaming. And it turned out her boyfriend had shaken her baby to death. So it can also be an auditory thing. In my own life, just sitting outside on a beautiful summer day and setting up my laptop to write, and in my backyard that I think is so pretty, I'll just sit out there and I drop into flow and time will just fly by. Specific music can drop me into flow. So it's all situational, depending on you. So how you learn to identify those triggers is through situation awareness. The next time you find yourself in flow, take note of what got you there. What's the temperature? Who are the people you're around? All I have to do, now I'm going to tell you about the Georgia Smoke Diver program in a minute, but all I've got to do is go to Dalton, Georgia, pull into the parking lot. I hear the guys on the training ground and I drop into flow and I'm in that mode for 6 days straight. So it just depends on the situation, and you'll learn to consciously trigger flow through training and experience also. So all flow activities are transformative. But it's not always easy to transform into flow. I had one firefighter who told me a story about when flow didn't happen. It doesn't always happen like we expect it to. And you can improve your ability to transform into flow. Csikszentmihalyi's research identified 3 conditions that need to be in place for transformation into flow. When the conditions are right, and right, of course, is situational. Flow happens when we practice unconscious self-assurance, which comes out of a knowledge of self, contextual knowledge, and knowledge of the tools and methods available to you to do the activity. It also happens when we focus our attention outward onto the world, where the work is no longer about us. It requires that we keep the other, whatever the other is, first and foremost. If you're out gardening, it isn't necessarily a person. It might be that you're gardening and you are focused on what you're doing. Service requires commitment and a desire to build a better future for whatever it is that's coming after us. And the third component of the transformation is that we're working on solving the obstacles that get in the way of meeting goals. While there might be patterns in everyday life, no moment is the same. Every moment presents new opportunities for decision-making, possibility, and more obstacles. Being able to discover those new solutions requires that you be prepared, that you remain purpose and mission driven, and that you are situationally aware. And you're doing whatever you can do to push through to get the job done. It requires bravery, grit, perseverance, and resilience. It also requires emotional intelligence. This is Melissa Russell. She's the first woman in 23 years to finish the Georgia Smoke Diver program. She trained and conditioned for over a year. The guys didn't cut her any slack at all. Her class named her class leader, a position she kept the entire week, which is really unusual. I noticed about halfway through the week, she was having difficulty breathing. When she graduated, she went to the hospital and found out she had double pneumonia. She had it all week long, but she got through the class. I sat down with her at the following class and asked her about her experience and being physically compromised. She told me she didn't have time to be sick. She was the class leader. She had to make sure her classmates were eating enough, getting to the training ground on time each morning, and that they were all okay. She was focused completely outward. She did not experience any kind of sense of self that whole week. She was able to act with confidence and from a place of knowing because of her high cognitive ability, low inhibition, and high emotional intelligence. She moved through time from one moment to the next while still staying in the present. I'm going to go through these pretty fast. I started to delete them because I didn't want them to slow me down, because I want to leave time for questions and answers. But it's really important to, in order to experience flow, to maximize your flow states, you need to be prepared. And that means you, in all aspects of your life, physically, mentally, spiritually, all of those things kind of have to be working together. You maintain your equipment, you maintain, you do everything on a holistic level. And you want to attend to the others that you impact and build a community for yourself, which is what STC, we were talking about this right before we started the meeting. STC is a community. It's a tribe. I have friends that from STC that are still my best friends in the whole wide world, and we're scattered all over the world from Israel to India and everywhere in between. The other thing you want to do is planning, making sure the best way to stay in the moment and to experience flow is to have your plan in place. That way you know you're always working toward your long-term goals. Set aside the time to do that. Reflect and then review and reinvent. So let's talk about the Georgia Smoke Diver program for a second. What happened? I wrote my dissertation in 2009, 10, and 11. I finally defended in June of 2011. And one of the participants in my study was David Rhodes. And I sent the dissertation out to all my participants, and David called me and invited me to a Georgia smoke diver training. And I was so excited. So I went to the November 2011 class, and I haven't missed a class yet. So I have been to, I think it's 17 trainings now. Once he invited me, I just never left. I keep going back. These are not, Georgia smoke divers are structural firefighters. They are not they're not jumpers. People ask me all the time, are they the guys that jump out of the planes? No, these are structural firefighters. This just happens to be the name of their program. It's an extreme experiential. Not sure how that happened. So, it's an extreme experiential training program, kind of like think Hell Week in Navy SEALs. That's what this is. It is a intense program. So up until now, we've kind of focused on you as the individual. So now we're going to jump into talking about how team flow works and the leadership model that supports team flow and organizational flow. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Georgia smoke diver. But the commitment of these guys is amazing. They all come to the class on their own time. They take vacation twice a year. The ratio of instructor to student starts out at the beginning of the week about 2 to 1. They'll have about 100 instructors and about 40 people who start the class. And by the end of the week, it's about 3 to 1 because there's such a huge attrition rate. The attrition rate is usually around 60%. So they only have about 40% of those who start actually finish. So you have 3 instructors per student who are watching every move you make and making sure that you're safe, that you're learning, and that you are getting what you need to out of this program. Every aspect of the Georgia Smoke Diver program is documented, published, and maintained in real time. These are actually documents from the original smoke diver program, which started in 1978. And they have hung on to all this stuff, which is amazing to me, how they've managed their knowledge over the year. Over the years, they use the incident command system, which is what is used in the fire service to run big operations. When you have an incident that's really big, they use the incident command system. But they have task books, they have drills that are documented, they have speeches that are documented and designed to motivate and to inform, and then they have the history that is documented, and it's all, and that includes pictures, videos, tacit, and all the tacit knowledge sharing that they do, and it's all digitized. It's quite amazing. So after hanging out with them for about 5 years, I started, and I was taking pictures. It's really hard when your hands are freezing to take notes when you're observing, and the temperatures are in the 20s, because they always do this in November and in March. And so began to I documented by taking pictures, and I kind of became the de facto photographer. Although they do have their own smoke diver photographers. I can't go in the buildings because I'm not a smoke diver or a firefighter. So they have guys that can go in the buildings and do drones and all kinds of other kinds of things that I don't have access to. But I did it so that I could come home and write about it. And as I'm looking through my pictures, I'm starting to see patterns. And over the year, I thought there is a leadership model. How did they do this? That they've been able to sustain this program since 1978. And it runs like a well-oiled machine. And so have you ever seen a murmuration of starlings? I know you have because you're in Texas and I used to see them all the time. A murmuration of starlings is a group of thousands of little tiny birds who are moving as one across the horizon, usually to keep themselves safe. And that's why I use this as my model for showing my image for showing the model, rather than the regular consultant pillars of components that make up a particular model. You can't have, if any of these components it is not working, the whole thing falls apart. It has to work together, just like that murmuration of starlings. And there's a physics component to that we don't have time to get into right now. But if you're ever interested, you can ping me and we can talk about it. So we're going to go through these one by one. Unfortunately, this is a linear format, so I have to do them one by one. But keep in mind, they all have to work together. So the first one is the first component is in just about every leadership model you come across. You lead by example. But I have never seen it quite in practice so distinct as I did in this Georgia Smoke Diver program. That's David Rhodes on the right, with the braid across his hat. He has just given a punishment to this firefighter. I don't know what he did, but David doesn't just give the punishment. He gets on the ground with them and does it with them. I know you did wrong. What you did was wrong. And I'm going to do this with you so you can get through this. That's a lead by example moment. Communication in the fire service is huge. Everything is about communication. But at the basic level, when it comes to organizations, what they focus on first is the mission. They have a mission, they have a creed, and they have core values. And that is what is taught to the students on day one, why they're there. They want to tell them why they are doing what they're doing in this program. The students have to be able to recite the creed, which is, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not. This is the creed. It's a lot of words. And they'll be doing PT the very first day. First thing they do is they learn to do physical training, and they have to be able to recite this creed. So they have to learn it before they come to the class. And a lot of them can't do it. it doesn't knock you out of the running, but the guys will embarrass the heck out of you if you can't say it on day one. The mission is to prevent death and injury by training firefighters to be adaptable and develop critical decision-making skills in high-stress environments. And it's read to the morning briefing every single day. And I asked Rhodey, I said, why do you read it every day? He said, because we want to stay laser focused. I don't know if any of you work at Southwest Airlines or have ever been to Southwest Airlines, their corporate headquarters. When you walk in the door, I was there on a contract back in the mid-90s. You walk in the front door of corporate headquarters, and the glass behind the receptionist desk or the security desk, their mission is etched in glass. All of the secretaries had little orange cards in a stack on their desk that had the mission printed on it. Every 20 feet down the hallway, the mission is framed and put on the wall in corporate headquarters on every floor. That is focus on mission. It keeps people focused. They also have core values: competence, honor, integrity, excellence, mental toughness, passion, and commitment. And the last drill that they do for the week is that they have a drill where they have to put nuts and bolts together in a certain order. And each one of those nuts on that bolt represent the core values. So as they're doing the drill, they're thinking about the core values. So it's a training opportunity to keep them focused. Also in fire, they have processes and procedures documented. Real-time communication involves instructions, internal notifications, changes in plans. They meet 3 times a day during this training to go over what has happened the night before, what are we gonna do this morning. Then at 2 o'clock, they meet again to say, what did we do this morning that we need to fix, document it so we won't do it that way next year. Then what do we have to do for the rest of the afternoon? And then in the evening, they meet again to determine what they're going to do the next day. So it's a constant communication. That does not mean they don't have conflict. They have had conflict that I've observed, but it's how they manage the conflict. So they're very respectful in their communication. If there's conflict between 2 firefighters, they're expected to work it out between themselves. If it's on the team works it out among itself. But if it involves the whole organization, they had a situation happen where Rhodey stopped the whole class, took them into the base of the burn building. And since I was the little proverbial fly on the wall, he let me come in there with him. And he said, this is what happened. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to this is how we're going to handle it. We're done. And then he said, what's the good word? Everybody yelled smoke diver. And they went out and it was done. It was over. So they have a method for managing conflict that was so effective. I've never been in an organization that was able to do it quite so effectively and respectfully. Commit to a stable infrastructure. That's our next component. Nothing will pull you out of flow quicker than the blue screen of death. Am I right? So we always want our equipment, our infrastructure, our environment to support the work that we're doing. They often, now they have their own, for a while, the sheriff of this particular county let them borrow their command center. And now the smoke divers have their own command center that someone just gave to them after they retired it, which was amazing. They have to burn a lot of stuff for this class. One of the things I mentioned to, or I asked returning students is when they return, they get to be an instructor, even though they're at the lowest level of instructor. If you go through the class and you come back, you can instruct. And I asked them, did you have any idea all of this was going on in the background? And they didn't. The student was there to learn, and the situation, the infrastructure is set up to facilitate learning. They never had to worry about whether they had enough to drink. They never had to worry about whether they were going to get to eat. They never had to worry about whether they could use the facilities when they needed to. They never had to worry about being safe. All of those things were taken care of for them so that all they had to do was focus on learning. Find the group with ritual, storytelling, knowledge sharing, and collaboration. This is knowledge management, but ritual is kind of a different thing. And I'm not talking religion or anything spiritual particularly. It's about making meaning out of situations that are unique. There's one drill that they do on Wednesdays where you have to go through the burn building doing a set of tasks 5 times on 2 air packs. And the first class I went to, one of the guys, there are a couple of situations where they let you start over. He started over 10 times. He was on his 10th time through the building, and everybody else had been done for about an hour, and he ran out of air about 10 minutes before he came out, and he's breathing all this smoke. And as soon as he came out the correct window, Rhodey said, "Don't let that man touch the ground." And all the instructors, we're talking 70 instructors, went over to the ladder, picked him up, and carried him to his team. That is what I'm talking about, making meaning. He'll never forget that. Those guys still talk about that night. That was in 2011. They still talk about how that student accomplished that. So it's something that binds the group in terms of how committed they are. And they tell stories. There's a lot of tacit stories that they tell, and they get wilder every class I go to. Because I've been hanging around with them for so long, I end up showing up in some of the stories, which is just bizarre to me. But there's a lot of knowledge sharing too. And by knowledge sharing, I'm talking about the drills being based on incidents that happened where there was loss of life. For example, the Denver drill. I'm moving to this slide because this is a picture of the Denver drill right here. In Denver, Colorado, there was a firefighter who lost his life. He was in a hallway that was this wide, and there's a window that this firefighter is coming through. In that particular incident, they couldn't get to him. They couldn't package him and get him out, and he had lost consciousness, and he ended up dying. So now all over the world, including I have friends in France who they teach the Denver drill. So that's a story that has perpetuated all the way around the world. And people and firefighters learn how to get somebody out of a small space through a window. So, and this particular component is honoring individual creativity. So they are taught about the Denver drill. They're told how you can get somebody out, but they also encourage students to come up with their own way, because creativity is how you're going to get better and better and better. In this picture, there is an instructor who has told them how to package a downed firefighter. Now, the class is incremental. So they start out teaching everything they want them to know. The first couple days, it's outside in the open, no face mask, no air. But as the week progresses, it moves from that scenario to smoke to fire. So they do the drills repetitively throughout the week until they're finally in a fully involved situation. But here, this instructor is listening to them discuss what they might do differently, or how they might do it. I saw one of the smoke divers. His name is William Casper, and Casper is my height. He's 5'2". We look eye to eye together. And when people tell me they can't go through this program because they're short, I'm going like, that's not true. Of course, he's a little chunky monkey. He's solid as a rock. But I saw him teaching this very drill on how to package a down firefighter. And he told the students, he said, look at me, I'm short. I have to use leverage. So he had come up with a way to do the work using his own limitations. And he's trying to get them to come up with their own way of doing what they need to do safely and effectively. Use positive motivation techniques. I noticed the first class I went to, they kept assigning people to the Mo squad. And I asked Rhodey, I said, what's the Mo squad? And he said, motivational. The only thing they do is motivate. And I thought, that's their only job? And he said, yeah, they're just there to motivate the students. So, and at the beginning of the week, the motivation kind of sounds like what makes you think you're good enough to be here. And then on Wednesday, they actually call it out in the morning briefing. They call out, okay, now we're going to change it up. We're going to start encouraging them. So it becomes, you got this. And you see a change in the students almost immediately. And these guys are incredible motivators because they're out there doing it with them. And this is after the morning PT, they take a 3-mile run. And these guys are out there with them in front doing the run. Lead by example. And the last thing on the model is to facilitate flow for others. Flow-based leadership is about maximizing your own flow states while facilitating the flow states of others. The only way to do that is to talk to people and find out what their flow states are. But in this, it's being aware too of when people are out of sync. So when they were running up this hill, they were kind of off, and they got to the top of the hill, and Jonathan decided he was going to give them a little talk, impromptu. Not all of us are that articulate, but I saw they trued up. They were in sync going back, and they were totally in flow with each other after Jonathan gave him his little talk. Now, since I came up with this model, I added a component that is not on the original drawing, and that is mentoring. It's so important to mentor, that you do that for longevity. And that's how this organization has lasted since 1978. Firefighters are usually only have like a 20-year span in their profession. They start young, and 25 years later, 25, 30 years later, they retire. So that's a short period of time. And when they go through this program, most of them are really young, 20s and 30s. And there were a couple that have gone through in their 50s and about kicked their butts. But in this picture, this is when I decided to add mentoring to the model, because Jason here in the front, Jason went through the class, my first class. And Joel back here, he's I dimmed him out on purpose. Joel, when I first started, didn't have a gray beard. He was the burn master. And he was the one that gave the briefing on Wednesday morning when they do this really hard drill that I told you about earlier. And he always did it from 1988 up until a couple of years ago. He always did that briefing. But Jason had, after he went through the training, he kind of moved toward being on Joel's team, and he enjoyed that, and he let people know that he enjoyed that. And all of a sudden in one class, Joel was getting ready to do the briefing, and he just handed the paper over to Jason to do the briefing. And later I asked Jason, I said, did you know he was going to do that? And he said, no, I did not know he was going to do that. And now Jason is burn master. So it was that simple, but Joel mentored him to a point where he knew he could turn it over. Change begins with individual choice. Being a flow-based leader involves knowing and sense-making. As technical communicators, you're on the front line. You make explicit how the organization presents itself in the world, and that's a huge responsibility. Individual mindfulness champions mindful behavior, setting the example for others. So change begins with you, taking responsibility for your life, for your career, and for your work. So identify, what do you love to do? What are your strengths and weaknesses? What is your life mission? What does your mission align with your organization's? What are your goals? What are your flow triggers? Consider creating a process for yourself that enables you to reflect on, revisit, and reinvent yourself on a regular basis so that you don't fall into boredom and ultimately irrelevance. Can an organization exist without technical communication? I'm a little bit bigoted on this subject. I don't think they can, not efficiently. Comm is foundational for flow-based leadership. It sets the tone for the organization by communicating how the organization's mission, culture, products and services, and operations are to be implemented. At the end of the day, workers want to go home feeling as though they have contributed to the success of the organization. If they do not have policies and procedures and the other communications that they need to do their work, and the knowledge that they need to do their work, if they can't find the information or be able to use the infrastructure within the organization, they'll find a way to be productive, which may or may not align with the mission of the organization. As technical communicators, we know this, but those around us often feel that the effort it takes to manage knowledge of the organization is not worth the time or expense. And the reason they don't call upon us to do the work isn't just because they're trying to save money. Often it's because they don't know we exist. We love doing our work, but we live in a world where visibility is everything. One must be seen to be relevant. We have to be able to branch out from our cubicles and our home offices and advocate for the work, for our audiences, and for ourselves. The work we do enables others to be the best they can be within the confines of the organization. It is incumbent on us to become flow-based leaders in service to our organizations. This means we need to take responsibility for becoming the best we can be at our craft, keeping a user-centered focus and communicating our values to those who commit resources. And I'll leave it right there. I don't know what time it is. So I don't know if we have time for questions or not.
Yeah, we do. We've got about 6 minutes left, so we do have time for questions. Addison says, I'm feeling inspired. Me too, Addison. There's a lot. I'm definitely going to have to watch this again. There's so much to wrap my head around and so many concepts that feel intuitive, but I need to process it better. But this was awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So should I look in the chat? Let's see.
Sure.
Thank you, Addison. Thank you, Josh. Don't see any questions.
Don't either.
Judith, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi,
Mhm.
this is Beth. I apologize. I joined late. I was having trouble with the link getting access. So something you said when you were talking about the mentoring, you said at one point something made you add mentoring to the model. Is that what you said? So it made me wonder, how long did it take for this model to evolve? Is it something that you still find that you tweak?
I'm still tweaking. It's
Okay.
in my it's described here we go. It's described in my book, Flow-Based Leadership. And then there I have a chapter in each one of these books. I was the author, co-author and co-editor of these books also.
Okay.
So so my model is described in here, but I added the mentoring piece of it as a component after I wrote this book. So
okay.
because I was watching, because that didn't happen. It took me, this is a mashup of my dissertation, and although I de-academified it.
It's a good one.
And then I making up new words. That's what we do. It's a mashup of my dissertation and what I learned from observing the smoke diver program for 5 years.
Okay.
So that the mentoring piece kind of slapped me in the face when some of the guys that were really leaders in the program, when I first started visiting with them, they started to retire. And I started to see the change in makeup, and I started watching, and I talked to David Rhodes about it, and he said they were, and I asked him, I said, when are you retiring? Well, he just retired. So it'll be interesting in November. I don't know if he's going to retire from Smoke Daddy. He's Smoke Daddy right now. And So I don't know if he's going to do that right away. They originally, Smoke Daddy was also the operations chief. And when David took over as Smoke Daddy, he brought on Brent Hollander, who became operations chief, because Brent is better at operations and David is better at motivation.
I see.
And so that, so I don't know. He told me that he thinks Brent's going to stay in that job a little while longer. Brent is still working for Atlanta Fire Department, and so he'll probably stay in that role. He's a little bit younger than David, but I'm watching it evolve and I'm documenting it as it happens. So there may be a follow-up
Great.
to this book eventually.
Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Hi, Judith. This is Zora here.
Hi, Zora.
Hi. First of all, thank you for this amazing presentation. And by the way, I won your book last year, and I have read it, I don't know how many times. And I have.
Thank you.
Yes, and it is personally autographed by you. So it's one of those books that I hope to pass on to my children someday. But yes, I did not come across mentorship. And then when you mentioned it, when you clarified to Beth, I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Because it kind of blindsided me. I should have asked the question earlier. When I was observing them, I should have talked to Rhodey about it earlier, but everything was kind of cranking along. And then all of a sudden, people were retiring. I'm going like, okay, now what happens? So it didn't happen until after 2017, I think, when all this change started happening. So, yeah.
Thank you for bringing this to us.
Sure. I love talking about it. It is my flow state. Can you tell?
That is awesome. That is perfect. That's a perfect way to end this. Well, everybody said positive things in the chat, and I concur wholeheartedly. So this has really been something special. Thank you so much, Judith, for presenting.
Oh, thank you. It's so nice to talk to the Lone Star chapter.
Oh, I was excited to learn that you were a former president. How cool.
Yeah. And Jackie Demereaux, do y'all know Jackie?
I don't.
She was one of the editors of my book.
Okay.
Paul, yeah, Addison and Paul are nodding. They know Jackie.
Oh,
She was one of the editors, yeah. So, and she reviewed my book for something, I think for STC.
oh, how cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So
Awesome. Well, gosh, just thank you so much for this. And I'm have your permission to put it up on our YouTube page, and I'll let you know when it's up there so you can check it out if you want to. But this has really been awesome. I learned so much. And like I said, I need to go back and I need to get your book so that I can really get my brain into it.
that would be awesome. It's also on an audio. It's also available on Audible.
Oh,
My publisher said, who do you want to read your book? And I went, I get an audio book? And he goes, yeah. I said, Morgan Freeman. And he goes, I can get a Morgan Freeman like person.
that's awesome.
But I ended up getting a woman to read it because the men who auditioned could not. Women firefighters do not sound like romance novel women, and so I got a woman to read it because she was a little bit more strong sounding.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool. That's so cool. Well, I'm definitely going to go look it up on Amazon after we're done.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much again for today. And I hope everybody has a great day, and reach out if you have any further questions about this. All right.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, y'all.
Yes. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
You too.
Thanks.